Today we're looking at an in-development tower defense title comically enough named TileDeck TD. And if you're wondering why that is funny to me, try saying the game's acronym a few times fast, and realize that my sense of humor is a mix of dad jokes and juvenile plays on words. But I digress. We've got towers, we've got monsters, and we've got to defend ourselves. TileDeck TD uses a formula a few of you will be familiar with, being a roguelite tower defense, which has become a bit of a popular genre since the release of Rogue Tower a while back. TileDeck approaches this with a bit more of a weight on the deck builder aspect a lot of these games use to manage the turn-to-turn strategy outside of the towers themselves. This is mainly because your deck is actually used every turn to modify your towers or the map, while the tower building itself is left to the traditional gold model. Now, being a still in development game, the balance is going to be all over the place currently, with the demo getting updates on a rather frequent basis, to the point where I actually worked my way through 6 versions of the game while preparing this What Is video as they squashed bugs and added features brought up by an active Discord community. Though these are planned to slow down as it approaches early access in the near future, with the demo being kept in a fairly straightforward setup, while the early access build will eventually add more towers, factions, modes, etc. Now, the core mechanics of this game are actually pretty straightforward. When you launch a round of the game, you choose your faction to decide what card set you'll be using for the run, each with their own pros and cons. The way this remains balanced is that there is a core set of cards available to everyone, and then your faction adds flavor options that make the runs just feel a bit more distinct. In the demo, this is limited to 2 factions, Phoenix and Lion, with Phoenix packing a decent amount of card generation, fire damage themes, and curse negation that make it the most popular choice on the Discord, while Lion focuses on attack range, crit damage, as well as my favorite building called the Armory, which provides a fun attack speed boost and is why I prefer it for my personal playstyle. Building out the map and mazing is also tied to these cards, thankfully solely as part of the core set, though I would not mind seeing tools for this tied to one of the factions, since expanding the map is an integral part of the game's strategy. This is because placing one of your tile cards triggers 2 effects. First being that it obviously places the pathing indicated on the card, but providing a 1, 2, 3, or even a null path just down on the location that you choose. But it also will trigger the icons underneath the tiles, and these are how you perform modifications to your deck, with mana gain, card draws of various values, and even card removal being potential spawns. Though there are also some special aspects to building out your map as well. The one most people run into a few times will be the curse squares, which do the usual icon effects we mentioned, but also place a curse card in your deck, and you will know one of these is coming because of the skull flag present on the square. That, and they're fairly common, so you'll pretty much never finish a normal run without hitting a few. Another special square you'll see are an in-development object called a light post that has yet to be given functionality, but will randomly pop up on the map and will provide effects in future releases. But it can also serve as a jumping off point and roadblock to keep you on your toes with map building, or to provide you with a spot to play no path sectors onto just various things to gather desirable resets without modifying your normal path. The last map object you'll probably run into, because it's a secret you're meant to stumble on by accident, are shrines that will give you a buff at the cost of a permanent or major curse, with buffs ranging from attack speed buffs for sectors near your castle, to the ability to benefit from curse cards, and a handful of others, and the downsides ranging from increased enemy speed all the way to knocking your castle down to 1 health, which you will need to claw your way back up from. These are a fun thing to play with, though always do so with caution, and if you accidentally make one and you don't want the offer it gives, you can always refuse it by taking a point of damage to your castle, which is much easier to recover from. As far as what you'll be placing on this map, obviously towers are going to be the meat and potatoes, but you will also get castable structures to augment either the tower or your castle, or even later on things like card draw. Starting with the most fundamental part of tower defense games, we have the towers though, of course, currently sitting at 6 flavors. But more are in the pipeline, with the 3 towers being able to only target ground units, while the other 3 are able to deal with both air and ground threats currently, all of which can be upgraded to level 5 for maximum damage and increase in price as you build more of the same tower, so variety is essential to keep the cost down, and you will want to be upgrading the towers to kind of counteract the cost increase. Now, the 3 that are able to hit anything are going to be your starter tower, the Ballista, which is a fairly fast-firing, decent range, albeit mediocre damage tower that fits the role as an affordable starter tower. You also have the Mage Tower, which is a slow-firing, similar range to the Ballista, but provides a heavier single target damage and applies a damage amplifying curse to surrounding units. And finally, there's the flamethrower, which does terrible damage on its own, but applies a burn that does % damage to enemies over time, and is one of my favorites for distributing along paths before my kill zone, especially in the late game. For the ground-only towers, you'd think they'd be less useful, but the reality is they are essential for cleaning out and controlling the mobs, so you can focus down the flyers before they get to your castle, with the cannon being your long-range artillery with a small area of effect that has great tools for softening things up from far away, the Radiance Tower, which is a localized area of effect that deals better damage than the cannon and is great for knocking things out in, say, corners and cleaning up trash, while the Dark Tower is your control tower that will snare ground units for a short period of time while dealing a little damage as well. Currently, combining all 6 really does feel useful, and I hope future towers maintain a similar utility feeling. Now, as you probably guessed, you don't start with these all unlocked. Instead, you get them through card draw, and by casting them, you add them to your pile of purchasable towers. These will always stand out nicely when doing your card select, since they show as a basically light gray card, and each type of card uses a symbol as well in case the player is colorblind. As far as the other permanent buildings you'll have, these are support buildings. They show in orange, and so far each faction has access to a handful of generic ones as well as a faction-specific one. The generic ones being ice pillars that slow enemies down in a tile, barracks that boost tower damage in a small area, gardens that have a chance to heal the castle each turn, towns that boost maximum life, mines that generate gold based on the towers near it, and eventually the library that will give you a chance at additional card draw when you unlock it later. Now, the class-specific ones have a lot more flavor and utility, with fire beacons on the Phoenix side providing map-wide attack speed buffs when placed close, and map-wide damage buffs when placed far away, while the Lion has Armory, which provides an attack speed buff in a small area, but unlike the other buildings is able to be recast rather than having the card destroyed when cast. As far as your blue cards, the actual spells you'll be casting turn to turn, these do much more basic effects, such as healing the castle, some forms of card draw or mana generation, or more commonly providing various boosts to damage, gold find, attack speed, etc., with some providing smaller boosts permanently or larger boosts temporarily. Similarly, curse cards provide detriments, but on draw exclusively, rather than on cast, with the main way to remove them from your deck being to pay the casting cost, though there are sometimes other options. Thankfully, they all currently have the trashed trait, so once a curse is cast, it's gone until you get another one from placing a tile or taking a deal from a shrine. Last up, we have the enemies, which are still very much in development, with speeds, health, scaling, and even some traits in association with towers currently being experimented with and modified rather regularly. The current model splits them between flying and ground, primarily as stated earlier, and I think it works fairly well, though some element systems have been tossed around in the past, so we could see that come up again in the future. Now, the towers can choose to target enemies based on a few factors you get to pick, such as speed, life, or even just whether they are first or last in terms of distance to the castle. And this is essential to use for ripping apart the hordes on their way to you. I would not be surprised if we see a toggle on some of the towers for target flying or something, but currently it is not in the game yet, so we could just see this solved by including flying target-specific towers. Overall, I've enjoyed my time with the game and look forward to seeing it enter early access in the near future, and hopefully a full release with a plethora of game modes, challenges, and maybe even an endless mode. As long as the game balance remains enjoyable, I love seeing what people do with the roguelite tower defense genre, as I think the roguelite flavor has added a lot more to tower defense than most of the alternatives in the past. Now all we need is someone to mix this with Sanctum, and I think I'll be set for life.